The first sign of trouble came in the form of an electric bill. I remember staring at my phone screen in confusion at 6:47 on a Tuesday morning, coffee mug halfway to my lips, as I tried to make sense of the notification. $238.47 for my Lake Geneva property. In January, when it was supposed to be empty, I assumed it was a mistake. The vacation house had been closed up since Labor Day weekend. Sure, I kept the heat running at minimum to prevent the pipes from freezing, but that had never resulted in a bill over $80 before. I tapped the notification, navigating through to the detailed usage chart. The spike had started exactly 5 weeks earlier, just after Christmas, and maintained a consistent daily usage pattern since then. Someone was definitely in my house. Set down my coffee and immediately called the property management company. "Mrs. Richardson, we'd have notified you immediately if there was a break-in or any maintenance issues," the manager insisted. "Our staff checked the exterior just last week. Everything appeared normal." "Someone is using electricity, Mark. A lot of it. Perhaps the smart thermostat is malfunctioning? We could send someone today, please, and I want them to go inside. Not just check the perimeter." I hung up and headed to the shower, but my mind wouldn't let go of the puzzle. The Lake Geneva house had been a point of contention in my divorce from Daniel 2 years ago. He'd wanted to sell it and split the proceeds, but it had been purchased with my inheritance money and I'd fought to keep it. My attorney had prevailed, and the lakefront property had remained solely in my name, along with full maintenance responsibility and the sweet satisfaction of victory. Daniel had been furious. He'd always loved that house more than I did. I got dressed for work. I briefly considered calling him to ask if he knew anything about the electric bill situation, but dismissed the idea immediately. We maintained a polite but distant relationship for the sake of our college-age son, Jordan. The last time we'd spoken was at Thanksgiving, a brief and cordial exchange when he dropped off a pie while picking up Jordan for the weekend. By mid-morning, I was in my office at the architecture firm, half-heartedly reviewing plans for a corporate headquarters renovation, when my phone rang with Mark's name on the display. "Mrs. Richardson," he began, his voice oddly strained. "We've encountered a situation at the property." My stomach tightened. "What kind of situation?" A pause. "There appears to be someone living in the house." I nearly dropped the phone. "Someone's living there? A squatter?" "Not exactly," Mark said carefully. "The woman claims she has permission to be there." "From whom?" Another hesitation. "Your ex-husband, Mrs. Richardson. She says she's his fiancée." The words hit me like a physical blow. Daniel was engaged, and he'd given his new fiancée permission to live in my house? "That's absurd," I said, fighting to keep my voice even. "The house is solely in my name. He has no legal right to grant anyone access." That's what I explained to her, but she's quite insistent. She showed our maintenance manager some text messages supposedly from Mr. Richardson, telling her the house was available for her use. She seems genuinely confused by our concerns. I closed my eyes, struggling to process this information. Daniel had been seeing someone seriously enough to get engaged, and somehow failed to mention it to me or, apparently, to our son. Jordan would have told me if he knew his father was planning to remarry. "What's her name?" I asked. "Alyssa Carlisle. Mid-30s, I'd guess. She's been quite pleasant, despite the awkward circumstances." Pleasant? Of course she was. I remembered. Daniel's type. "I want her out of my house today, Mark. That could be legally complicated without proper—" "She has no lease. No legal right to be there. Tell her she's trespassing on private property, and she has until 5 p.m. to vacate before I involve the police." Another pause. "There's one more thing, Mrs. Richardson. She appears to have redecorated portions of the house." "What do you mean, redecorated?" "New furniture in the living room. Different artwork on the walls. She's painted the kitchen." I felt a surge of genuine rage. My perfect lake house, the source of so many happy memories with Jordan, my sanctuary after the divorce, had been invaded and altered without my knowledge or consent. Take pictures of everything before she leaves, and change all the locks immediately. After hanging up, I sat motionless at my desk, my mind racing. This wasn't just about unauthorized use of my property. This was Daniel deliberately crossing boundaries in a way that felt deeply personal. I grabbed my phone again and pulled up his contact, but hesitated before calling. No, confronting him while furious wouldn't be productive. I needed more information first. I opened Instagram instead and searched for Alyssa Carlisle. Several accounts appeared, but one profile picture showing a smiling blonde woman standing on a familiar dock caught my attention. My dock. I clicked on the profile and found it was set to private, but her bio read, "Living my best lake life with the love of my life. Daniel Richardson, 34. So she'd been documenting her stay at my house on social media. I navigated to Daniel's rarely used profile. His most recent post from 3 weeks earlier showed him and the blonde woman, Alyssa, holding champagne glasses on my lakeside deck. The caption read, "New year, new beginnings with this incredible woman. Ours engaged." 47 comments congratulated them, including several from people I recognized as our mutual friends, who apparently hadn't thought to mention to me that my ex-husband was not only engaged, but celebrating at my vacation property. I scrolled through more of their photos. Alyssa, cooking in my kitchen, now painted a cheerful yellow instead of the sage green I'd carefully selected. Alyssa curled up with a book on an unfamiliar gray sectional that had replaced my comfortable old leather couch. Daniel and Alyssa watching the sunset from the deck, drinking wine from glasses that came from my grandmother's collection. With each image, my anger intensified. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a deliberate takeover of the space that had been my emotional refuge after our marriage collapsed. My office phone buzzed with my assistant's voice. "Your 11:30 is here, Claire." "Cancel everything for the rest of the day," I said, already grabbing my coat and purse. "I have a family emergency." 3 hours later, I pulled into the driveway of my Lake Geneva house, gravel crunching under the tires of my BMW. A sleek white Audi I didn't recognize sat in front of the garage. The remnants of recently disturbed snow showed where the property management's truck had been parked earlier. I stepped out of my car, key in hand, and approached the front door. Before I could insert it into the lock, the door swung open, revealing a woman who matched the Instagram photos, but seemed somehow younger and more beautiful in person. "You must be Claire," she said with a smile that appeared genuinely warm. "I'm Alyssa. I'm so sorry about the confusion. Daniel should be here any minute to explain everything." I stared at her, momentarily speechless. She wore designer jeans and a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than the electric bill that had alerted me to her presence. Her blonde hair fell in perfect waves around a heart-shaped face. On her left hand, an enormous diamond caught the winter sunlight. "There's no confusion," I said finally, finding my voice. "This is my house. You're trespassing. You need to leave immediately." Her smile faltered slightly. "I understand you're upset. Daniel explained there might be some territorial feelings because of your history, but he assured me the property was available for our use." Territorial feelings, our history, as if my legal ownership was some minor emotional attachment. "Daniel has no authority to offer you this house. We've been divorced for 2 years, and the property is solely in my name." She looked genuinely confused. "That's not what he told me. He said it was still jointly owned, and that you hardly ever use it anymore." A car door slammed behind me, and I turned to see Daniel walking toward us, his expression a mixture of surprise and something like resignation. "Claire," he said, his voice carefully neutral, "I wasn't expecting you." "Evidently not," I replied coldly. "Would you care to explain why your fiancé is living in my house?" Daniel glanced at Alyssa, then back to me. "Let's discuss this inside." No, I said firmly. I want her belongings packed and removed today. Then we can talk, preferably with our attorneys present. Alyssa's eyes widened. She looked at Daniel. You told me there wouldn't be any problems. You said Claire was fine with the arrangement. I laughed, a sharp sound without humor. There is no arrangement. Daniel has systematically lied to you about his right to offer you access to property that is legally mine. Daniel stepped forward, lowering his voice. Claire, be reasonable. The house sits empty most of the year. Alyssa needed a quiet place to work on her novel, and I thought, you thought you'd just help yourself to my property without asking? You thought I wouldn't notice someone living in my house, repainting my kitchen, replacing my furniture? I was going to call you, he insisted. Things just moved quickly with the engagement, and I didn't want to create tension before I had a chance to explain properly. I stared at him in disbelief. The man I'd been married to for 18 years, the father of my child, was standing on the porch of the home I legally owned, trying to justify giving his new fiancée free rein to move in and redecorate without so much as a text message to inform me. You have until 5 p.m., I said, my voice steady despite my rage. After that, anything left behind will be considered abandoned property. Alyssa looked stricken. But that's only 2 hours. I can't possibly pack everything. Not my problem, I cut her off, then turned back to Daniel. And be advised, I'll be reviewing all the security footage to document exactly how long this illegal occupancy has been going on. Daniel's face changed then, a flicker of something like alarm passing over his features. Security footage? He asked. From the surveillance system I had installed last year, I said, watching his expression carefully. The one that's been recording activity inside and outside the house 24/7 since then. The blood visibly drained from Daniel's face. That's when I knew there was much more to this story than an unauthorized house guest, and I was going to discover exactly what it was. I spent the night at the Lake Geneva house, reclaiming my territory like an animal marking its den. After Daniel and Alyssa had packed their essentials and departed, with Daniel promising to return for the new furniture tomorrow, I'd walked through each room, cataloging changes and violations. The kitchen's new yellow paint was just the beginning. The master bedroom had different linens. The guest bathroom now featured a rainfall shower head. My old study had been transformed into what appeared to be Alyssa's writing space, with an elegant white desk facing the lake view and a corkboard covered with color-coded note cards, presumably chapters or scenes from her novel. I opened the liquor cabinet, relieved to find my collection of expensive whiskeys untouched, and poured myself a generous glass of Macallan 18. Then I settled onto the unfamiliar gray sectional, which was admittedly more comfortable than my old leather couch, and opened my laptop to access the security system. The surveillance setup had been installed after a string of break-ins at neighboring properties last winter. 6 cameras covered the exterior approaches, and 3 more monitored key interior spaces: the main living area, the kitchen, and the hallway leading to the bedrooms. All footage was stored in cloud backup for 60 days. I scrolled back to December 26th, the date the electric bill showed usage had begun. Sure enough, at 2:17 p.m., Daniel's Range Rover pulled into the driveway. He got out, used a key I didn't know he still possessed to enter, then returned to help Alyssa unload luggage and several shopping bags. They looked happy, laughing as they struggled with their burdens through the light snow. I fast-forwarded through footage showing them exploring the house together, Alyssa's delighted expression as she took in the lake views, their first dinner. At my dining table, drinking champagne to celebrate. What? Moving into my house? Their engagement? I checked the metadata. December 26th. The Instagram post announcing their engagement had been dated January 2nd, so they weren't engaged yet when they moved in. Interesting. For the next hour, I sampled footage from different days, building a timeline. They'd painted the kitchen on December 28th. The new furniture had arrived on January 3rd. Daniel hadn't stayed every night. I observed him leaving with overnight bags several times, presumably to maintain his regular work schedule in Chicago. But Alyssa had remained continuously, apparently settling in for a long-term stay. I was about to close the laptop when a clip from January 4th caught my attention. Daniel was on the phone in the kitchen, pacing as he spoke, his expression agitated. I turned up the volume. Not what we agreed, Richard. The payment was supposed to be processed last week. A pause as he listened. I understand market fluctuations, but this is my future we're talking about. Another pause. No, she doesn't. Suspect anything. Claire hasn't been to the lake house in months. She's completely focused on her career. He laughed without humor. Trust me. As long as I occasionally take Jordan to dinner and pretend to be a dutiful ex-husband, she doesn't pay attention to what else I'm doing. My stomach clenched at the casual dismissal. Was that how he saw me? So absorbed in my architecture career that I was oblivious to everything else? The engagement has accelerated the timeline, that's all. Alyssa's family has the connections we need. Once we're married, her father's firm will bring me on as partner, and nobody will question where the money came from. I sat up straighter, rewinding to replay that section. Money? Connections? What was Daniel involved in? Just make the transfer happen, Richard. I need to show Alyssa I can contribute meaningfully to our new life, especially after she found out about the debt situation. Debt situation? This was news to me. During our divorce proceedings, Daniel's financial disclosures had shown him to be in excellent shape financially. His investment advisory business had been thriving, generating a comfortable six-figure income. That's why the judge had denied my request for alimony, despite the significant income disparity between us. I jumped ahead a few days to January 10th. Now Daniel was again on the phone, but his demeanor had changed completely. He was smiling, relaxed, pouring himself a drink as he talked. It's all been resolved, sweetheart. The investment paid off exactly as I projected. Yes, all of it. No, we won't have to scale back any of the wedding plans. He laughed. I told you to trust me, didn't I? By this time next year, we'll be looking at property in Malibu, not just a vacation house in Wisconsin. My hands froze over the keyboard. What investment had suddenly paid off? Daniel specialized in conservative portfolio management for wealthy retirees. His firm's entire brand was built around stable, low-risk investments. I continued sampling footage over the next several days, focusing on Daniel's conversations. Most seemed innocuous. Discussions about wedding venues, debates about honeymoon destinations, complaints about his ex-business partner. Then, on January 22nd, I struck gold. Daniel and Alyssa were in the kitchen. She sat at the island counter, with a glass of wine while he prepared dinner. I still don't understand why we can't just tell Claire we're staying here, she said, twirling her engagement ring, the diamond catching the light just as it had earlier today. It feels dishonest. Daniel didn't look up from the vegetables he was chopping. Claire would never agree. She kept this house to spite me during the divorce, even though she barely uses it. But you said it was jointly owned. It was supposed to be, he interrupted. Her lawyer pulled some tricks with the inheritance angle. Trust me, if I told Claire we wanted to stay here, she'd say no just to be difficult. Alyssa sighed. Still, she's going to find out eventually. And what about Jordan? Doesn't he ever visit the house? Daniel scraped the vegetables into a pan where they sizzled. Jordan's spending the semester in Spain. By the time he gets back, we'll be married and settled in our new place. This is just temporary. And what about the money? Alyssa asked, her voice lower. You still haven't told me exactly where that investment return came from. Daniel turned to face her, his expression serious. It's better if you don't know all the details, Alyssa. Richard and I have been working on this deal for months. It's perfectly legal, just creative. She didn't look convinced. My father won't tolerate any financial impropriety, Daniel. You know how careful he is about the firm's reputation. There's nothing improper about it. Daniel insisted. It's just not the kind of opportunity I could have accessed while still in partnership with Bradley. He was always too conservative, unwilling to pursue higher yield options. I remembered Bradley Williams, Daniel's business partner of 15 years. They'd had some kind of falling out 6 months after our divorce, and Bradley had bought out Daniel's share of the firm. Daniel had started his own smaller practice afterward. I'd assumed the split was amicable. Professional differences, perhaps. Now I wondered if there was more to that story. The footage continued, with their conversation moving on to wedding plans, but my mind was racing. Creative investments, accelerated timelines, money that seemingly appeared overnight. It all pointed to something potentially illegal. Securities fraud? Insider trading? I wasn't sure, but it warranted further investigation. I closed the laptop and reached for my phone, scrolling through contacts until I found the name I was looking for. Bradley Williams. We'd maintained a cordial relationship after the divorce, occasionally running into each other at charity events. If anyone could shed light on what Daniel might be involved in, it would be Bradley. The call connected on the third ring. Claire Richardson. Bradley's warm voice came through. What a pleasant surprise. Bradley, I hope I'm not interrupting. Anything important? Not at all. Just finishing up some paperwork. What can I do for you? I hesitated, unsure how to broach the subject delicately. I was hoping we might meet for coffee. There's something I'd like to discuss regarding Daniel. A pause. Is everything all right with Jordan? Jordan's fine. He's enjoying his semester abroad. This is something else, related to Daniel's current business activities. Another pause, longer this time. I see. In that case, coffee might be inadequate. Are you free for dinner tomorrow? There's a new place in the West Loop I've been meaning to try. Dinner would be perfect. Good. And Claire? It might be best if you didn't mention our meeting to Daniel. I felt a chill at his words. I wasn't planning to. After we hung up, I leaned back on the sectional, taking another sip of whiskey. Between the unauthorized occupation of my house and whatever questionable financial scheme Daniel appeared to be involved in, I had plenty to be angry about. But as I surveyed the room, the new furniture, the rearranged artwork, the lake house that had been my sanctuary now bearing another woman's imprint, I realized what bothered me most was the casualness of it all. Daniel had simply helped himself to what was mine without a second thought, assuming I was too preoccupied to notice or care. He'd lied to his fiancée about ownership, painted me as unreasonable and spiteful, and disparaged me as an absent mother too focused on her career. My phone pinged with a text from Jordan. How's everything back home? Barcelona is amazing. I smiled at the attached photo of my son standing in front of Gaudi's Sagrada Familia, looking so grown up at 20. The architectural student following in his mother's footsteps. Everything's fine, I texted back. Just some interesting developments with your father. We'll catch up on our regular Sunday call. I hesitated, then added, Did you know he's engaged? 3 dots appeared immediately, then disappeared, reappeared. Finally, what? To who? Since when? So Jordan hadn't known either. Daniel had kept his engagement secret from our son, too. I typed, Recent development, still gathering details. Don't worry about it now. Enjoy Spain. Love you. He sent back a heart emoji, but I could tell from the long typing gaps that he was processing this unexpected news. I poured another finger of whiskey and walked to the sliding glass doors that led to the deck. Outside, the frozen lake stretched silver-white under the moon. My lake, my house, my sanctuary. Not anymore. It had been violated, not just physically, but in some deeper, more significant way I couldn't yet articulate. As I watched a distant light, moving across the ice, probably a night fisherman heading home, I made a decision. I wouldn't just reclaim my property. I would discover exactly what Daniel was involved in, how Alyssa figured into it, and why they had specifically targeted my lake house for their deception. Tomorrow's dinner with Bradley would be the first step, but it wouldn't be the last. I raised my glass to the night. "Game on, Daniel," I whispered. The restaurant Bradley chose was exactly the kind of place that made Chicago's culinary scene famous, inventive without being pretentious, bustling without being chaotic. He was already at the table when I arrived, rising to greet me with a warm hug that reminded me why I'd always liked him better than most of Daniel's other friends. "You look well, Claire," he said as we settled in. "That promotion to design principal agrees with you." "Thank you for remembering," I replied, genuinely touched. "It's been challenging but fulfilling." Bradley had always shown interest in my career, unlike Daniel, who had viewed my professional success with thinly veiled resentment as it began to eclipse his own. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd been the supportive spouse when Daniel and Bradley launched their firm, even designing their office space for free. But when my own career took off, Daniel had accused me of prioritizing work over family. After we ordered drinks, Bradley leaned forward. "So, what's this about Daniel's business? Activities?" I gave him a concise account of discovering Alyssa in my lake house, Daniel's deception about ownership, and the intriguing phone conversations I'd overheard on the security footage. Throughout my explanation, Bradley's expression grew increasingly grave. "I was afraid of something like this," he said when I finished. "The timing fits the pattern." "What pattern?" Bradley sighed. "The real reason Daniel and I dissolved our partnership wasn't just philosophical differences, as we let people believe. I discovered irregularities in some client accounts. Nothing definitive enough to make accusations, but concerning enough that I began monitoring more closely." My stomach tightened. "Are you saying he was embezzling?" I couldn't prove anything. When I raised my concerns, he became defensive, then suggested a buyout. I agreed, partly because I wanted a clean break if there was potential impropriety brewing. Our drinks arrived, and I took a grateful sip of my martini. "But you suspected something specific." Bradley nodded. "Daniel had been cultivating unusually close relationships with some of our highest net worth clients. Elderly clients specifically. He would visit their homes, run personal errands for them, become almost like family. Initially, I thought, it was just excellent client service. But it wasn't. 2 of these clients changed their investment directives substantially after these personal relationships deepened. They moved large portions of their portfolios from our standard conservative allocations into private investment vehicles Daniel had set up. When I asked for documentation and prospectuses, he provided paperwork that seemed legitimate, but lacked substantive details. A chill ran through me. "And after you bought him out?" "One of these clients, Margaret Winters, died about 4 months ago. Her children contacted me, confused about some investments that weren't part of our firm's standard management. They'd found documents referencing substantial transfers to an entity called Lakeshore Opportunities Group. Daniel's new company is Lakeshore Financial Advisors," I said slowly. "Exactly. But here's where it gets strange. When her estate's attorneys tried to locate these investments to include in probate, they essentially hit a wall. The paper trail ended with the transfers out of our firm. Whatever happened to that money after Daniel redirected it remains murky. Our food arrived, but my appetite had vanished." "How much money are we talking about?" "In Margaret's case, nearly $2 million. I nearly choked on my drink." "And you think Daniel, what? Stole it?" Bradley held up his hands cautiously. "I'm not making accusations. It's possible there's a legitimate explanation. But combined with what you've overheard, sudden windfalls, accelerated timelines, it raises serious concerns. What about this Richard person Daniel mentioned on the phone?" "Richard Holloway," Bradley supplied immediately. Former client of ours who followed Daniel when we split. Wealthy widower, early 80s, some cognitive decline, but still legally competent. Exactly the type of client I was concerned about. I pushed my plate away, mind racing. So Daniel could be manipulating elderly clients into investing in non-existent or fraudulent opportunities, then using that money to fund his new lifestyle with Alyssa. It's a possibility, Bradley conceded. But without more evidence, it remains speculation. The security footage might contain more, I said. And if Daniel's using my lake house as some kind of base for these operations, be careful, Claire, Bradley interrupted, his expression serious. If Daniel is involved in financial fraud, confronting him directly could be dangerous. He'd have everything to lose if exposed. I appreciated his concern but felt a surge of determination. I'm not going to confront him without evidence, but I'm also not going to ignore what might be happening, especially if vulnerable people are being victimized. Bradley studied me for a moment, then nodded. You always did have a strong moral compass. It's one of the things Daniel resented most about you, you know. What do you mean? He found your ethical clarity inconvenient, said it limited his options. Bradley gave a humorless laugh. I should have recognized the red flag in that statement, years ago. We finished our meal discussing next steps. Bradley would discreetly inquire about other former clients who had followed Daniel, checking if any similar irregularities existed. I would continue reviewing security footage and monitoring Daniel's activities at the lake house. As we parted outside the restaurant, Bradley hesitated. There's something else you should know. Daniel's been experiencing financial difficulties for some time. After our split, he lost several major clients. Then there was that bad real estate investment in Nashville. What real estate investment? This was the first I'd heard of it. He put nearly everything into a development deal that collapsed about 8 months ago. Took several other investors down with him. Bradley shook his head. I'm surprised he didn't have to sell his Chicago condo. That explained the debt situation Daniel had mentioned in the security footage, and perhaps why my fully paid-for lake house had become so attractive. Thank you for telling me, Bradley, for all of this. He squeezed my shoulder gently. Just be careful, and let me know if you discover anything concrete. If Daniel is defrauding clients, it needs to be reported. I spent the next day at my architecture firm, struggling to focus on client meetings, while my mind continually drifted to Daniel's potential schemes. During my lunch break, I received a text from an unknown number. This is Alyssa Carlisle. Got your number from Daniel's contacts. Can we meet to talk? Alone. I stared at the message, surprised and intrigued. What could Daniel's fiancée possibly want to discuss with me? Why? I texted back. There are things you should know, things I'm uncomfortable with. I hesitated, remembering her expression of confusion at the lake house, her question to Daniel about the mysterious money. Perhaps she was having doubts. When and where? I responded. Tomorrow, noon, Kingsley Coffee on Michigan Ave. I'll be in the city for dress fittings. I agreed to the meeting, then spent the rest of the afternoon alternating between work tasks and discreet research. A LinkedIn search revealed that Alyssa's father was Lawrence Carlisle, founding partner of Carlisle, Harding & Moore, one of Chicago's most prestigious corporate law firms. Daniel's comment about Alyssa's family connections suddenly made perfect sense. I also discovered that Alyssa herself had an impressive background, degrees from Northwestern and Columbia, 5 years at a top publishing house in New York, and now apparently working on her first novel. She frequently appeared in Chicago society pages at charity events, often photographed with her parents, the golden girl to my career-focused pragmatism. I could see why Daniel had been attracted to her. That evening, I returned to reviewing security footage from the lake house. Now that Daniel and Alyssa had been evicted, the cameras showed only empty rooms, but I continued examining older clips, looking for anything suspicious. In footage from January 15th, I struck gold. Daniel was at the dining table with an elderly gentleman I didn't recognize, presumably Richard Holloway. Spread before them were documents which Daniel pointed to as he spoke. Guaranteed return of 12%, minimum. The beauty of this arrangement, Richard, is its simplicity. Your funds are pooled with those of select other investors to maximize leverage, but your principal remains protected. The older man nodded, though he looked somewhat confused. And this is different from the other investment, how? Daniel smiled reassuringly. The previous opportunity was focused on commercial real estate development. This one leverages private equity in established companies, lower risk, higher potential return, perfect for this stage of your portfolio. If you think it's the right move, I trust you, Daniel. You've never steered me wrong before. The conversation continued with Daniel skillfully addressing Richard's occasional questions with confident but vague assurances. Eventually, Richard signed several documents, which Daniel collected with a satisfied smile. "You won't regret this," Daniel said, patting the older man's shoulder. "I'll process everything tomorrow." After Richard left, Alyssa emerged from the bedroom area, where she'd apparently been keeping herself scarce during the meeting. "Another investor?" she asked, wrapping her arms around Daniel from behind. He turned to kiss her. "The last one we need. With Richard's contribution, we've reached the threshold." "So we're set for the wedding? For everything?" "More than set," Daniel assured her. "We're looking at a completely fresh start. No more debt, no more scraping by on diminishing client fees. Once we're married and I'm established at your father's firm, no one will question where the money came from." Alyssa's expression flickered with something, doubt, concern, but she quickly masked it. "I still think we should have an actual office for these meetings. Using Claire's house feels inappropriate." Daniel's face hardened slightly. "It's convenient and impressive. Clients like Richard respond to the setting. It conveys success, stability. Besides, Claire literally never comes here in winter. She's completely absorbed in that big hospital project." He was right about that. I'd been leading the design for a major medical center expansion, a career-defining project that had consumed much of my attention for months. But his casual confidence in my absence still stung. I fast-forwarded through more footage, finding 3 more client meetings conducted in my dining room over the following weeks. Each followed the same pattern: elderly clients, vague investment descriptions, signed documents, and money presumably changing hands afterward. It was nearly midnight when I discovered the most damning clip yet. Daniel was alone in the kitchen. On the phone again, his tone jubilant. It worked perfectly, exactly as planned. "No, the funds have been moved offshore already. Of course I covered our tracks," he laughed. "By the time anyone notices anything, we'll be married, I'll be established at Carlyle's firm, and the money will be completely laundered through legitimate investments." Laundered. The word hung in the air like a neon sign. This wasn't just questionable ethics. It was criminal activity. I stopped the footage, hands shaking slightly as I reached for my phone to call Bradley. Then I hesitated, looking at the time. This couldn't wait until morning, but I needed more than just Bradley's advice now. I needed professional legal counsel. Instead, I called Patricia Morales, a tough-as-nails attorney who had represented several of my firm's clients in complex construction disputes. She answered despite the late hour. "Claire? Is everything all right? I need to speak with you professionally. It's urgent." "I'm listening." I outlined the situation concisely, including what Bradley had shared and what I'd discovered in the footage. "This sounds like a matter for securities regulators and possibly criminal investigators," she said when I finished. "But you need to proceed carefully. Collecting evidence from your own security system is one thing. Taking any action that could be construed as entrapment or interference with a potential investigation is another. What should I do next?" "Secure." Copies of all relevant footage. Don't confront Daniel yet. Meet with this Alyssa person. She could be complicit, or she could be another victim. Either way, you might learn something valuable. We agreed to meet at her office later in the week. To review the evidence properly, after hanging up, I backed up all the incriminating footage to multiple secure locations, then sent Bradley a brief update about what I'd discovered. As I finally prepared for bed, my phone pinged with a notification from Instagram. A mutual friend had tagged me in a comment on a post. Curious, I opened the app to find a formal engagement announcement from Daniel and Alyssa. The photo showed them dressed elegantly, champagne glasses raised, standing in what appeared to be the ballroom of the Peninsula Hotel. The caption read, "Delighted to formally announce our engagement. Please join us this Saturday for a celebration at the Peninsula Chicago, 7 p.m. Love of my life forever starts." I stared at the image, noting Alyssa's slightly strained smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. 4 days from now, they would be celebrating their engagement publicly, while I possessed evidence that could send Daniel to prison. And tomorrow, I would be meeting Alyssa for coffee, where she promised to tell me things she was uncomfortable with. The timing couldn't be coincidental. Something significant was unfolding, and I was determined to understand every aspect of it before making my next move. I closed the app and set my alarm, mentally preparing for what promised to be a very interesting conversation with the woman who had taken over my house, and who might now be having second thoughts about the man she'd agreed to marry. Kingsley Coffee was crowded with the lunch rush when I arrived the next day, but I spotted Alyssa immediately. She sat in a corner booth, her blonde hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, looking less polished than she had at the lake house. The enormous engagement ring still adorned her finger, but she twisted it nervously as she watched the door. I ordered a cappuccino before joining her, taking a moment to steady myself. This wasn't a confrontation, at least not yet. This was intelligence gathering. "Thank you for coming," she said as I slid into the seat across from her. Her voice was softer than I remembered, almost hesitant. "Your message intrigued me," I replied, studying her face. Up close, I could see the tension around her eyes, the slight pallor beneath her perfect makeup. "You said there were things I should know." Alyssa glanced around as if checking for eavesdroppers, then leaned forward. "First, I want to apologize about the house. Daniel told me it was still jointly owned, that you'd agreed to let us use it while I finished my book. I never would have stayed there if I'd known the truth. Yet you redecorated, painted my kitchen, replaced my furniture." She had the grace to look embarrassed. "Daniel said you'd mentioned wanting to update the place but hadn't had time. He suggested the changes would be a welcome surprise." She shook her head. I realize now how ridiculous that sounds. I sipped my cappuccino, keeping my expression neutral. "Why are we really having this conversation, Alyssa? I doubt you arranged this meeting just to apologize." She took a deep breath. "I think Daniel might be involved in something unethical, possibly illegal." Despite already suspecting this, hearing it from his fiancée sent a chill through me. "What makes you say that?" "About a month ago, I overheard part of a phone call that didn't make sense. Daniel was discussing investment returns that seemed impossibly high. When I asked him about it later, his explanation was evasive." "Go on?" "Then I found documents in his bag. Client authorizations for fund transfers to accounts I've never heard of. Companies with almost no online presence." She twisted her ring again. "When I questioned him, he got angry, said I was overstepping, that his business dealings were separate from our relationship." I thought about the footage of Daniel with Richard Holloway, the confident promises of guaranteed returns. "Have you met any of his clients?" She nodded. "Several. Mostly elderly people. He brought them to the lake house for meetings." Her eyes met mine. "Your lake house. I think he was using it to impress them, to appear more successful than he actually is." And when did you start to suspect something was wrong? When one client's daughter called looking for her father. She sounded worried, said he'd made financial decisions recently that were out of character. Alyssa swallowed hard. Daniel brushed it off, said the woman was just concerned about her inheritance being redistributed. But something in his reaction felt rehearsed. I considered revealing what I knew from the security footage, but decided to hold back. Have you spoken to anyone else about these concerns? No, she said quickly. My father would immediately involve lawyers, possibly authorities. The scandal would ruin Daniel professionally. And if I'm wrong, she trailed off. But you don't think you're wrong, I supplied. Alyssa's eyes filled with tears. 2 days ago, I found a passport in Daniel's desk. Not his regular one. A second passport, with his photo but a different name, and a bank card for an account in the Cayman Islands. She wiped her eyes carefully. Who has those things unless they're planning to disappear? My heart raced. This was far more serious than I'd imagined. What are you going to do? That's why I wanted to talk to you. You were married to him for years. You must have insights I don't. She looked down at her engagement ring. The scary thing is, part of me still loves him, still wants to believe there's an explanation. I recognized the conflict in her expression, the same one I'd felt during the last years of our marriage, when Daniel's seemingly innocent lies began accumulating into something I could no longer ignore. Our engagement party is in 3 days, she continued. Everyone will be there. My family, our friends, Daniel's clients. I need to decide before then whether to go through with this marriage or— Her voice broke. Or expose what he's doing. I finished for her. She nodded miserably. I weighed my options carefully. Sharing everything I knew might send her straight to Daniel with warnings. But keeping her completely in the dark seemed cruel if she was genuinely conflicted and potentially another victim. I have evidence, I said finally. Security footage from the lake house, conversations Daniel wasn't aware were being recorded. Her eyes widened. What kind of conversations? Discussions about moving money offshore, about laundering funds through legitimate investments once he's established at your father's firm. I paused. About using your family connections to escape. Scrutiny. The color drained from Alyssa's face. Oh, God. I'm consulting with an attorney about next steps. There's enough evidence to warrant a formal investigation. When will you go to the authorities? Her voice was barely audible. I'm not sure yet. I need to review everything thoroughly with my lawyer first. Alyssa seemed to be processing rapidly, her expression cycling through shock, grief, and finally, something like resolution. I need to see this evidence. I'm not sure that's— Please, she interrupted. If I'm going to throw away my engagement, destroy my family's relationship with Daniel, I need to be certain. I understood her position, but caution prevailed. Let me consult with my attorney first. She'll help determine the best way to proceed. Alyssa nodded slowly. Our engagement party is Saturday night. I can't go through with it if he's really done these things. She looked up at me, her blue eyes suddenly clear and direct. Will you come? To the party? The request caught me off guard. Why would you want me there? Because I need someone who knows the truth, who can help me if— She didn't finish the sentence, but I understood the implication. If she decided to confront Daniel publicly, she wanted an ally. I wasn't on the guest list last time I checked, I said dryly. Alyssa reached into her purse and pulled out an engraved invitation. I had this made for you this morning. Daniel doesn't know. She slid it across the table. Please consider it. 7 o'clock, Peninsula Hotel. I stared at the invitation. Heavy cream cardstock with gold lettering announcing the celebration of Daniel Richardson and Alyssa Carlisle's engagement. My name was handwritten in the space for the guest. This is rather unusual, I observed. so is discovering your fiancé might be a criminal, she replied with unexpected sharpness. Then her face softened. I'm sorry. This isn't your problem to solve, but you're the only person who might understand what I'm going through right now. The irony wasn't lost on me. Daniel's ex-wife and current fiancé, united by his deceptions. I tucked the invitation into my bag. I'll think about it. As we prepared to leave, Alyssa hesitated. One more thing. Daniel mentioned the lake house has been in your family for generations, that it has sentimental value to you. It was my grandparents' home. I spent every summer there as a child. Her expression crumpled. He told me you bought it as an investment property just before the divorce, that you never really cared about it. She shook her head in disgust. He lied about that too. After we parted, I walked several blocks before calling Patricia Morales with an update on my conversation with Alyssa. She could be setting you up, Patricia cautioned. Testing how much you know, planning to warn Daniel. I considered that, I admitted. But her distress seemed genuine, and she provided new information about the second passport and offshore account. Regardless, proceed carefully. Bring all the evidence to my office tomorrow. I'll have a forensic accountant colleague present to review the financial aspects. I agreed, then called Bradley to update him as well. His reaction was more measured. It fits the pattern, he said. Daniel always had an exit strategy, even when we were partners. A plan B for every scenario. You think he's preparing to take the money and disappear? If he believes he's about to be exposed, yes. The engagement party would be the perfect cover. Everyone would expect them to leave for a honeymoon afterward. By the time anyone realized they weren't coming back, they could be established somewhere with non-extradition laws. The possibility sent a chill through me. But Alyssa seems to be having doubts. She might not go through with it. Unless her meeting with you was part of the plan, Bradley pointed out, gauging how much you know, what evidence exists. The same concern Patricia had raised. Were they right? Was I being manipulated again? That evening, I resumed reviewing security footage, focusing on any clips that showed Alyssa alone or interacting with clients when Daniel wasn't present. I found very little. She seemed to make herself scarce during business meetings. But one clip from January 18th caught my attention. Alyssa was in the kitchen, apparently home alone on her laptop. She appeared to be researching something intently, occasionally taking notes. I zoomed in on her screen. She was reading an article titled, Signs of Investment Fraud, What to Watch For. In another clip from January 25th, she was on the phone, speaking quietly while glancing toward the doorway as if ensuring she wouldn't be overheard. I'm just concerned, that's all, she was saying. The returns he's promising don't align with market realities. No, I haven't seen the actual investment vehicles. That's what worries me. She appeared to be seeking advice from someone with financial knowledge. A friend? A family member? The conversation continued, with Alyssa becoming increasingly agitated. I can't just accuse him without evidence, but some of these clients are elderly, vulnerable. I know. I'll be careful. This didn't seem like the behavior of someone complicit in fraud. It looked more like someone growing suspicious and concerned. Perhaps her meeting with me had been genuine after all. I continued searching through footage and discovered one final clip that solidified my impression. February 1st, 3 days ago. Alyssa was alone in the living room, crying, a glass of wine in hand. She was looking at something on her phone. Zooming in, I could see it was a photo of her and Daniel, smiling on a beach somewhere. Why couldn't you just be who I thought you were? She whispered to the image. The raw emotion in her voice convinced me. Whatever Daniel was involved in, Alyssa was not a willing participant. She was another victim of his manipulations, just as I had been. I closed my laptop and reached for the engagement party invitation, turning it over in my hands. If I attended, I would be walking into a potentially volatile situation. Daniel would be furious at my presence. Alyssa's family, including her powerful attorney father, would be caught in an uncomfortable scenario. But if Daniel was truly planning to disappear with stolen money, leaving behind devastated elderly clients who trusted him, someone needed to stop him. And with the security footage as evidence, I was uniquely positioned to do so. I texted Patricia, "I'm going to the engagement party. We'll bring all evidence to your office tomorrow to prepare." Her response came quickly, "Not advisable. Let authorities handle this once we've organized the evidence." I understood her caution, but something deeper was driving me. Not just a desire for justice, but a need to confront the lies that had shaped the last years of my marriage and continued to ripple through my life even after divorce. "I'll be careful," I replied. "But I need to do this." I pulled up my closer calendar and began scrolling through dresses, looking for something appropriately elegant for a Peninsula Hotel engagement celebration. If I was going to crash my ex-husband's party and potentially expose him as a fraud, I was going to look damn good doing it. The Peninsula Hotel's ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and elegant floral arrangements when I arrived at precisely 7:15 p.m. on Saturday evening. I'd chosen a sleek black dress that managed to be both appropriate and striking, paired with the diamond earrings Daniel had given me for our 10th anniversary, a small but satisfying touch of irony. I passed my invitation to the hostess at the entrance, half expecting to be turned away despite Alyssa's assurance. But she smiled and directed me inside, where approximately 100 guests mingled over champagne and passed hors d'oeuvres. The crowd was an interesting mix. Chicago society figures I recognized from charity events, presumably from Alyssa's, circles, business associates I knew from Daniel's career, and several elderly couples who fit the profile of the clients I'd seen in the security footage. I didn't immediately spot Daniel or Alyssa, which gave me a moment to gather myself and survey the room. "Claire?" A familiar voice came from behind me. "What on earth are you doing here?" I turned to find Melissa Cooper, the wife of one of Daniel's oldest friends, staring at me with undisguised shock. "Hello, Melissa. I was invited." I smiled pleasantly, enjoying her confusion. "By whom?" "Surely not Daniel." "Alyssa, actually. We've become acquainted recently." Before Melissa could respond, a server appeared with champagne. I took a glass, using the moment to spot Daniel across the room, deep in conversation with an older gentleman, Richard Holloway, I realized, recognizing him from the footage. Daniel hadn't noticed my arrival yet. "If you'll excuse me," I said to Melissa, who was still gaping, and made my way toward a less crowded corner where I could observe without being immediately seen by Daniel. I sipped my champagne slowly, mentally, reviewing the preparation I'd done with Patricia Morales. After examining the security footage and other evidence, she had reluctantly agreed that my attendance at the party could be strategic, not to create a scene, but to gather final confirmation, before we proceeded with formal complaints to the SEC and FBI on Monday morning. "Just observe," she had cautioned. "Don't confront, don't accuse. If Daniel realizes the extent of what you know, he might accelerate whatever exit plan he has." I'd agreed to her terms, though the USB drive in my clutch purse containing key security clips suggested I wasn't being entirely truthful about my intentions. I wasn't planning a dramatic confrontation, but I wanted to be prepared for any scenario. I scanned the room until I spotted Alyssa, stunning in a silver gown, speaking with an elegant older couple who had to be her parents. Lawrence Carlyle was exactly as I'd expected, distinguished, authoritative, clearly comfortable in his position of power. Alyssa's eyes darted nervously around the room until they locked with mine. A flicker of relief crossed her face before she returned her attention to her parents. 10 minutes later, as I was considering how best to approach Alyssa discreetly, Daniel finally noticed me. I watched as his expression morphed from confusion to disbelief, to controlled anger. He excused himself from his conversation and made a direct line toward me, maintaining a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Claire," he said when he reached me, voice low and tight. "What are you doing here?" "Celebrating your engagement, of course," I replied, matching his fake smile with one of my own. "It's quite an impressive event. You weren't invited." I pulled Alyssa's invitation from my clutch. "Actually, I was. Your fiancé and I have had some illuminating conversations recently." Daniel's jaw clenched. "Whatever game you're playing." "No. Games, Daniel. Just pursuing the truth. Something you've never been particularly interested in." His eyes narrowed. "If you're here to cause a scene, I'm simply here as a guest," I interrupted smoothly. "Though I've been reflecting on some interesting activities I observed at my lake house recently. The security footage was quite educational." All color drained from his face. "What exactly do you think you saw?" "Perhaps we should discuss it privately. Or would you prefer I elaborate here, in front of your prospective father-in-law? I understand Lawrence Carlyle is quite strict about ethical standards at his firm." Daniel's hand clamped around my upper arm, his fingers digging in painfully as he steered me toward a service door at the edge of the ballroom. 5 minutes. Then you leave." He led me into a small anteroom used for catering prep, currently empty, as the servers were busy attending to guests. The moment the door closed behind us, his facade dropped. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he hissed. "Coming to my engagement party? Threatening me?" "Threatening me? I haven't threatened anyone," I replied calmly, pulling my arm from his grasp. "I simply mentioned the security system at my lake house, the one you used for your little investment meetings with elderly clients. Did you forget it existed? Or did you never notice it in the first place?" A flash of genuine fear crossed his face. "Whatever you think you know, I know everything, Daniel. The fraudulent investment scheme, the offshore accounts, your plan to use Alyssa's family connections to launder money and escape scrutiny." I maintained steady eye contact. "I have hours of footage documenting your conversations with clients, with your mysterious partner Richard, with Alyssa. All of it." He stepped back, visibly calculating. "You're bluffing." "Would I be here if I was bluffing?" I opened my clutch and held up the USB drive without letting him touch it. "Selected highlights, ready to share with appropriate authorities. Or perhaps with Lawrence Carlyle, who I imagine would be devastated to learn what you plan to do with his firm's reputation." Daniel's expression shifted, anger giving way to something more calculating. "What do you want? Money? Is that it?" I laughed, genuinely amused by his misunderstanding. "I don't want your stolen money, Daniel. I want justice for the people you've defrauded. I want you to face consequences for once in your life." "You vindictive bitch," he snarled, mask fully dropped now. "You've always been jealous of my success, of my ability to move on after our marriage failed. Now you're manufacturing accusations because you can't stand to see me happy with someone else. Is that what you think this is about? Jealousy?" I shook my head in disbelief. "I've spent 2 years rebuilding my life after our divorce. I'm a design principal at one of the city's top firms. I have everything I need. What I don't have is tolerance for watching you victimize vulnerable people, including your own fiancé. Alyssa has nothing to do with this, doesn't she? You've lied to her from the beginning, about my house, about your finances, about the source of the money funding your new life together." The door opened behind us, and we both turned to see Alyssa standing there, her expression unreadable. "I've been looking everywhere for you," she said to Daniel, then glanced at me. "I see you've discovered Claire is here." Daniel quickly reassembled his charming persona. "Just catching up with my ex-wife. An unexpected surprise." Alyssa's eyes moved between us. "Did she tell you we've met? That we've discussed your business activities?" Daniel froze. "What?" "Claire shared some concerns about the nature of your Investments, Alyssa continued, her voice remarkably steady. About the meetings you conducted at her house, the clients whose money seems to have disappeared into companies that don't quite exist. Whatever she told you is a manipulative lie, Daniel insisted, reaching for Alyssa's hand. She's always been jealous, always tried to undermine my success. Stop. Alyssa pulled her hand away. I saw the evidence myself. The security footage from the lake house. This was news to me. I hadn't shared the footage with her yet. She met my surprised look with a slight nod, a signal I didn't quite understand. Daniel looked between us, realizing he was outnumbered. This is ridiculous. I have guests waiting, important people. Yes, you do, Alyssa agreed, including several of your investment clients, and my father, who's been asking questions about the conflicting information he's received regarding your business practices. The blood drained from Daniel's face for the second time that evening. What have you done? Nothing yet, she said. But I think it's time everyone saw the truth, don't you? She turned to me. Do you have the footage? I nodded, confused but willing to follow her lead. Good. Alyssa straightened her shoulders, looking more resolute than I'd ever seen her. Daniel, you have a choice. You can come back to the ballroom with us and face what's coming, or you can try to run. Either way, this ends tonight. Daniel's eyes darted between us, then to the door behind Alyssa that led back to the ballroom. I could almost see him calculating his options, weighing the possibility of escape against the public humiliation of being exposed. You're making a mistake, he said finally. Both of you. I can explain everything if you'll just listen. We're done listening to your explanations, Alyssa interrupted. They're as empty as your investment promises. She stepped aside, gesturing toward the ballroom. After you. To my surprise, Daniel moved past her through the door, straightening his tie as he went. Alyssa and I exchanged glances. He won't stay, I warned. He'll make an excuse and disappear. He can't, she replied with grim satisfaction. My father's associates are watching all exits, and the police have been notified. I stared at her. The police? I thought we were just going to show the footage. Things accelerated after our coffee meeting, she explained quickly. I contacted my father, showed him what evidence I had. He brought in specialists from his firm's white-collar crime division. They've been building a case while keeping Daniel under surveillance. She nodded toward the ballroom. Tonight was meant to be a trap. I processed this information rapidly. You used me as part of your trap. I needed to know if you had actual evidence or just suspicions, she admitted. Once I confirmed the footage existed, we moved forward with our plan. She looked at me directly. I'm sorry for not being completely honest, but we couldn't risk Daniel being tipped off. Before I could respond, a commotion erupted from the ballroom. We hurried back to find Daniel surrounded by several stern-looking men in suits. Not police, but clearly security or investigators. Lawrence Carlyle stood nearby, his expression thunderous. Guests murmured and stared as Daniel's voice rose in protest. This is a misunderstanding. I can explain everything. Alyssa approached her father, who put a protective arm around her shoulders. I followed, still trying to understand exactly what was unfolding. Mrs. Richardson, Lawrence Carlyle acknowledged. Me with a nod. I understand we have you to thank for the security footage that confirmed our suspicions. I was simply protecting my property, I replied. I had no idea the scale of what was happening until recently. Well, your evidence was the final piece we needed, he said. The investigators have been tracking unusual investment activities connected to Daniel for months, but the recorded conversations you captured provided explicit confirmation. Daniel's eyes locked with mine across the room, filled with pure hatred. You did this, he snarled. You couldn't stand to see me happy, so you ruined everything. Lawrence Carlyle stepped forward. That's enough, Daniel. The only person responsible for your current situation is you, The authorities are on their way. I suggest you cooperate fully. The ballroom had gone silent, all pretense of a celebration abandoned as guests witnessed Daniel's unraveling. I spotted Richard Holloway sitting stunned in a corner, two other elderly clients nearby looking equally shocked and confused. One of the suited men gestured to a laptop set up on a small table at the edge of the room. On the screen was a freeze frame from my security footage, Daniel at my dining room table, documents spread before him as he spoke to a client. "Is that what I think it is?" I asked Alyssa. She nodded. "We were about to show selected clips to certain guests, specifically the clients we've identified as potential victims. Your arrival accelerated the timeline." I felt a complex mix of emotions: satisfaction that Daniel was finally facing consequences, concern for the victims of his schemes, and lingering confusion about Alyssa's role in all of this. "Did you ever care for him?" I asked quietly. "Or was this a setup from the beginning?" Alyssa's composed facade cracked slightly, revealing genuine pain beneath. "I loved him," she whispered, "or the person I thought he was. Finding out the truth has been devastating." I believed her. The hurt in her eyes was too raw to be manufactured. Two uniformed police officers entered the ballroom, accompanied by men in suits who had to be federal agents. They moved directly toward Daniel, who had stopped protesting and now stood silently, defeated. "I think I'll go," I said to Alyssa. "This is becoming a bit more dramatic than I anticipated." She caught my arm. "Wait, there's something you should know. About the lake house." "What about it?" "The redecorating wasn't just aesthetic. Daniel was," she hesitated, "hiding things in the house. Behind walls, under floorboards." "Hiding what?" "Documents, cash. The second passport I mentioned." She looked apologetic. "The investigators have a warrant to search the property. I tried to minimize the disruption, but they'll need access for a few days." I nodded, processing this new information. "They can coordinate with my property manager." As Daniel was escorted from the ballroom, guests began dispersing rapidly, no one wanting to be associated with the scandal unfolding before them. I watched as Lawrence Carlyle spoke quietly with the elderly clients, presumably explaining what had happened to their investments. "What happens now?" I asked Alyssa. "For Daniel?" "Criminal charges, almost certainly. For his victims?" "My father's. Firm will help them try to recover whatever funds can be traced." She twisted her engagement ring, then abruptly pulled it off and dropped it into her evening bag. For me, a lot of difficult questions and a very different future than I imagined. I felt an unexpected surge of empathy for her. Despite our vastly different circumstances, we'd both been deceived by the same man, both had our lives upended by his dishonesty. "For what it's worth," I said, "you handled this with remarkable courage. Not everyone would have been willing to face the truth the way you did." She gave me a sad smile. "I had a good example. You rebuilt your life after Daniel. Now I'll have to do the same." As I prepared to leave, Lawrence Carlyle approached me once more. "Mrs. Richardson, the authorities will want to speak with you about the evidence you've collected. My firm would be happy to represent you through that process, pro bono, of course." "That's very generous, but I have counsel already. Patricia Morales." He nodded approvingly. "Excellent choice, formidable attorney." He extended his hand. "Thank you for your role in exposing this situation before more damage could be done." I shook his hand, thinking about the strange turns life can take. I'm just glad the truth came to light. Outside, the February night air was bracingly cold as I waited for the valet to bring my car. My phone buzzed with a text from Jordan. "Finally landed back in Chicago. Call me tomorrow? Dad's been acting weird and won't answer my calls." I sighed, realizing I'd have to explain this mess to our son. That conversation would not be easy. Another text came through, this one from Bradley. Just heard what happened at the peninsula. Are you okay? I'm fine, I replied. We'll call you tomorrow. With details. As I drove home through the quiet city streets, I reflected on the evening's events. This wasn't how I had expected the confrontation to unfold. I'd imagined a more private reckoning, perhaps even a chance for Daniel to make amends before facing legal consequences. Instead, I'd become an unwitting player in a sting operation orchestrated by Alyssa and her father. Yet the outcome was just. Daniel had manipulated and deceived vulnerable people for financial gain. He'd used my house without permission, lied to his fiancée, and planned to escape accountability through further deception. The security footage I'd discovered had been the catalyst for his downfall, but his own actions had set everything in motion. When I arrived home, I kicked off my heels and poured myself a glass of the same Macallan 18 I'd enjoyed at the lake house. My phone buzzed with a final text for the night, from Alyssa. Thank you for coming tonight. I know it wasn't what you expected. When things settle down, perhaps we could meet again? I'd like to return something meaningful I found at the lake. House that I believe belongs to you. I was curious, but too exhausted to ask for details. Let me know when you're ready, I replied. Setting down my phone, I raised my glass in a silent toast to the security system that had revealed so much more than an unauthorized houseguest. Then I turned my thoughts to the lake house, my sanctuary that had been violated but not destroyed. In the spring, I would return there, repaint the kitchen the sage green I loved, replace the furniture with pieces that spoke to me, and reclaim the space as my own. But perhaps I'd keep the rainfall showerhead in the guest bathroom. Some changes, even unexpected ones, turn out to be improvements after all. The security footage that had started this journey would be turned over to authorities tomorrow. Its purpose had been served, truth had been revealed, justice set in motion. Daniel would face consequences, his victims might recover some of their losses, and I had reclaimed not just my property, but something more valuable. The certainty that I had rebuilt my life on a foundation stronger than the marriage that had failed. As I drifted toward sleep that night, I realized that sometimes the most valuable security systems aren't the ones that protect our physical possessions, but those that guard our sense of truth, justice, and self-worth. Mine had been tested and had proven remarkably resilient. In Chiu, the morning, I would call Jordan and begin the difficult process of explaining his father's actions. I would consult with Patricia about the legal proceedings ahead. I would start planning the lake house restoration. But for now, I rested in the knowledge that sometimes the best revenge isn't planned at all. It's simply the natural consequence of protecting what's rightfully yours.